Well, welcome everybody. One more screen just got filled here. Um, Today my talk is about everything changes. It isn't difficult to accept that everything changes, a phrase that Suzuki Roshi often quoted. We pass from growing up to being adult, to being middle-aged, to being old, to going beyond. Although when one changes from one stage until the other is not exactly defined. I recently entered my mid-80s, but until the second half of last year, I had never actually felt old. It's a new experience for me. Although most of us are not fazed when we are young by the fact that everyone must die, it's somehow seemingly to lack relevance then. It was the prince who would become Shakyamuni Buddha who, on seeing examples of sickness, old age, and death beyond the confines of his family's palace grounds, recognized that everyone suffers. That was to become the first of his noble truths. Everything changes is one of the reasons for why he gave for why we suffer. This is not hard to accept either, because having personal problems is what first attracts a great many to the practice. Those who feel that everything is fine with their life are unlikely to be motivated by such an insight. Why the fact that everything changes causes us to suffer is because we like to avoid the truth in this. When things are going well for us, we don't want things to be any different. Desiring this situation always remains the same. What might be harder to accept about everything changes is that the natural impermanence of all things ultimately means that we cannot be said to exist then. Counter to our experience, the implication of everything being in flux, including us, is that a person who wakes up in the morning may not be the same as the one who went to sleep the night before, although I have yet to find that this is true. The classical explanation for nothing being able to be said to exist is that each and everything is defined in terms of everything else. My long relationship with Jane is an example of this. It is because of her that I am a husband. It is, without her, I would not be that. The same is true for Jane. She would not be a wife were it not for me. Much of what might be said about either of us would show the extent to which we are defined by each other. It is in this sense that we humans cannot be said to independently exist. We exist, but not independently. Our egos might disagree, of course, but as Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche put it, quote, there is no such thing as ego. It is a brilliant piece of art, a product of the intellect, which says, let's give it all a name. Let's call it I. This I, unquote, this I is our small self, and it is a product of the intellect, quote unquote, in that it is ultimately no more than a collection of related thoughts, themselves dependent on our having language. Jane and my couplehood is not just what it is moment after moment, but is also merely a picture of something. Thus, Rinpoche called the ego a piece of art, because, of course, it's a picture. The Mahayana Buddhist and so Zen restatement of the first noble truth, that everything suffers, is beings are numberless. I vow to save them. The first of the Bodhisattva vows. As you know, most of you will know, Bodhi is enlightened, and sattva is being. And so a bodhisattva, enlightened being, is someone who has had the insight that their self is Buddha nature. And so instead of the once intensely felt need to defend this impermanent small self that is defined by its relationship to others, there is a gain in the clarity of viewing and accepting others. It may seem like our seemingly fundamental self-concern has been replaced by an increased concern for others, but in that Buddha nature has always been there. And from that point of view, we are born bodhisattvas. It is more accurate to say that we naturally are enlightened beings who are kept from recognizing this by our misplaced concern for the small self. When first beginning to practice, we allow something called Buddhism to be superimposed upon our usual life, which until then has been based on our living according to the thoughts and feelings originating from what we considered our self. We have until then accepted the predominance of this self, but meditating begins the process of our coming to see the nature of our thinking more clearly. We find that individual thoughts and emotions enter our consciousness as if from out of nowhere and leave us in much the same manner, disappearing into nowhere at all. If such thoughts are not clung to, we can notice that they quickly pass into and out of our consciousness without leaving any traces. Not needing our attention, our not giving it to them leaves us more peaceful and calmer. In our practice outside of meditation, in the beginning, we use the precepts we've taken to likewise learn to recognize when we are being misled by thoughts that we once assumed represented us. However, the precepts in themselves do not have the authority to command us not to do something, or even to impose upon us a set of things we shouldn't do. Suzuki Roshi said that if there are precepts that we feel are impossible for us to follow, such, for example, as someone who is a farmer, for example, can't help but kill worms, if not more. He said that if it is impossible for us to follow, we should follow those precepts that we can. It's not written in stone. It is in doing zazen and in taking the precepts and not continuing to live in the ways in which we did things before that we come to recognize what our true nature is. While it'll take some time before we are able to practice moment after moment and solely be, therefore, in reality, it is there in the moment after moment that the relative and the absolute nearly meet. Then everything changes and enlightenment will not be experienced as different. In Buddhism, neither past nor future can be said to exist, in that the past has already gone by and the future has yet to come. They aren't real yet. They're ideas. They're thoughts. But the Genjo Koan declares that each moment, every moment in itself, has its own past and future. And in each moment containing both all of its past and all of its future in each moment has all that there is. And that all is what the absolute is. As mentioned in the talk last year, the Genjo Koan also says that the absolute and the relative cannot in fact be the same, each being defined as what the other isn't or where the other isn't, just as life and death are. So therefore, in Buddhism, we don't say life becomes death, because life is life. Okay? Before life, and we have afterlife, but what's only real is life. Okay? So life is life and death is death. Each moment is each moment. They're independent of each other, even though each moment in itself has a before and after. This is also fits, for example, life and death. Dogen explained that the reason for why the absolute and the relative cannot exactly meet cannot be one, is that the boundary of the absolute is not clear. By definition, the absolute is to be without boundaries. And what we can experience moment after moment then is the intimacy between the relative and the absolute. In the end, moment after moment, everything changes, seems synonymous with enlightenment, even if the absolute must remain unknown. To make it known would be to make it be what it cannot, which is relative. As our neighborhood Roshi in Japan, Tendai priest Horizawa Simon one day said, leaning towards Jane and me, Buddha is always coming. Buddha is always saying, I got turned around here. Buddha is always saying, come a little closer. Come a little closer. We don't recognize it, but actually our practice is just that. We're following the command of our Buddha nature to say to us, come a little closer. Come a little closer. Thank you. Integrate Jane into this by moving by moving oh, no, I got mixed up here. All right. Yeah. So do you have any questions or comments? Yes, Mike?
I still am confused by your statement saying that even though there is no future and no past, each moment is complete. It has a future and a past. I don't quite understand what that means. Can you clarify that a little bit more?
Good question. Can
Sorry.
It's hard to explain. That's for sure. Well, let me turn what I said around a little bit, not around, but put back to front. And what we're doing, I mean, in one sense, what we're doing, from the point of view of Buddha nature, our Buddha nature, is coming a little closer to it. Come a little closer. Come a little closer. On the other hand, what we're doing is becoming closer to reality. The reality is we have life and we have our individual life. Life is the absolute. Life is all there is what I said here. Okay? But it's the studying reality that allows us, through meditation, particularly, in our case, meditation, that allows us to do this. And so therefore, what's real, if you look at life really, really carefully, we have the past is all thought. The future is all thought. Okay. And we have our life, but right now, what we are always studying, what is right here, right now. Not what is the absolute for us, obviously, is not some deity or something that we can depend on and ask favors for, or complain to, or feel real humble in respect to. It's just what's here right now. And that's all that's real. And meditation shows us that. Everything else is created out of thought. But right here is no. Now there's three of those, no, three of those right there. There they are, or four. We'll do three, yeah. Okay. And so that, however, does have a past and a future. And but then that's kind of like as it were, classical Soto's explanation of it. It's a little hard to go further than that. But basically, let me say that what's important is integrating our life, and our life is life, and our life is us. In my case, me, Peter. Okay, but if I live just as Peter, it's a waste because I'm more than that. But if I live as some kind of the opposite, that's a waste too, because we're both. But we've studied that by this thing of being in the moment, and then that's the place where we can be closest to it. Once again, as I gave an explanation today that I've given relatively recently, but the unknown and the known can never be the same because they're defined that way. And so therefore, the absolute and life and death, the absolute and the relative also are defined with respect to each other, with thought, actually.
So future and past is basically a part of being in the now, because you're in the now, you're not in the past, you're not in the future, but they're not. I don't have an adjective. I can't figure a word to say, but I get from your saying that basically, even though you try to be in the now, be here now, that does imply a future and a past, because before I was in the now, I was in the past, thinking about the future beginning into the now. Am I even close to what you were saying?
Well, you may be close, but you're just you're just smarter than me. I can't. My mind can't move that fast.
Okay, sorry.
No. Actually, as you also know, because we actually nothing changes and everything changes. we don't experience. We don't think that we experience things. We experience, but prior to thought, that's the source. That's closest to the source. Prior to
You can't be in the now if you're in the past or in the future, because you're no longer here. Being in the now kind of separates you from that concept.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Chris.
When you discuss the known and the unknown, is there a correlation between those concepts and past, future, and now? Like, is now unknown and past, future is known, or other way around, maybe?
And I can't really answer that, but it's a very interesting idea. Okay, yeah. So, because I've never made that correlation in my mind before. I mean, what is the word known? Of course, means thought. It's a construction. So once it's known, of course, it's relative, and it's not the absolute. But I mentioned, I can't remember the exact quote, but I mentioned it really recently about Trump saying that uh, I can't exactly, I can't really parse it right now because it was really, but it was very similar and very different than what we say. What he said was, what Vajrayana says, it is that before we perceive something, there's a kind of a, if we're really in the present, there's a kind of a flash that takes place. Now, this sounds very different than what we were saying, but they're both metaphorically trying to say the same thing. But the minute it becomes known, of course, it's no longer unknown.
So
But
can we
but
ever really live completely in reality if reality corresponds to that split second or even smaller before cognition?
yeah, the important thing here is come a little closer. Come a little closer. That's what's important. That's what we spend our whole life doing it. We're very, very far away in the beginning, but it's like infinity. You can't get to infinity. Okay? The finite and infinity. Finite is relative, you know. So there's a point of diminishing. I guess they say there's a point of diminishing returns, something like that. Mark, thank you, Chris. That was good.
Hi.
Hi. I can't
Um,
recognize you.
so Buddha is always saying, come a little closer, just a little closer. It always reminds me of a song, of many songs that I've heard some seductress singing. Always about coming a little closer, but you never arrive. Now, I was thinking that we talk about the pairs of opposites, which we're running into with unknown, known, past, future, day, night. We run into that, and that's our parsing mind, and we can't understand this absolute. But there is, I realized something thinking about that is that if we have the past and the future, we also have the now, which is actually, there is no opposite of now, is there?
Well, of course, now and past is a pair of opposites. Now and future is a pair of opposites, aren't they?
No, I wouldn't say now has any opposite. Now is now.
But it's so fast. It's kind of hard to catch.
Well, the thing is what is now? Because, okay, we could say it's a second, we could say it's a moment, but I've had time last for long moments. I've had time last for very short moments. And scientists can break down moments into hundreds and thousands of moments, actions in the universe down. And it's never ending how precise you can get, or how imprecise, I suppose. Imprecise, well, yeah. I mean, a universal moment, or let's say a moment in the world, could be a million years, right? If we want to get intellectual like that. But I think what we understand is really as a moment is the breath. And that's where we start and that's where we end. That's where life enters and that's where life exits, And so I'm kind of thinking, well, how does that work with now? Well, we're breathing now. And so it's very, very, a very cohesive concept as concepts go. But maybe it might be our moments don't stop after we die. And in fact, there's people that claim to have had after death experiences and come back and talk about them now. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. I think it was this very insightful talk you have going, Peter. It's very, very insightful and confusing. It's slippery because we try to grab onto it with our minds. There's no way to grab onto the absolute with a mind. You can't grab it. You're always approaching it. You're never getting there.
Yeah,
The more you-
it's very slippery. And what we always should remember is that when we try to explain it, of course, we can't.
No, we can never explain it.
We can't because it's a foregone conclusion that as it were that we cannot. But we can remember is that we're always trying to explain, come as close as we can to explain what is real.
Oh, that's another sticky one.
What is real? What is real? And one definition of what is real, very simple one, which is not sticky, is the here and now.
Here and now. Again, there's no opposites in here and now.
Time and place. That
Time and place.
those are coordinates that locate us. Time right here and now. Here and now. This is not what I.
That's very nice. That's very nice. Yeah,
I read this in the past 2 days, so it's not mine, but here and now, here now.
Time and place, here and now.
Yeah. We don't even need and, do we? Just here now. Here now.
I think you're right.
Here now. Thank you, Mark. Mitch.
So for me, going on what Mark is saying is there's no up without down. There's no left without right. It doesn't have any meaning. Up doesn't have any meaning without down. So if there's a now,
Yep.
there's a not now.
Yep.
Okay. So we might be able to define it. The absolute, talk about the absolute, trying to define it. We can't define it because we're not absolute. Our true nature is, but if our mind can grasp that absolute, is probably beyond us. Just like they say in some of the Gothists, right? That there's no knowledge and there's no not knowledge, right? They use that some in the Buddhist literature. So there's now and there's not now. So there is an opposite as far as I'm concerned.
The relative exists. Of course it does.
Yeah. And the past and the future, to me, is, the past is a memory, right? Which is faulty. And the future is just a wish or a desire. Hasn't happened yet. It's only another dharma, right? And all you have is that slice right in the middle. Isn't that what the Abhidharma is about? Isn't it the psychological, the moment by moment?
I don't know.
Okay.
But anyway, usually Abhidharma is a name for all of the texts together, as it were, or all of the knowledge together.
I thought it was an individual section of.
It is an individual section. It's an explanation of it, I think, isn't it? But I'm not certain about.
Yeah, my understanding of it, it's psychology, the moment to moment psychology.
Yeah, sure.
Of how we process things.
Yeah, that's in a way, I'm trying to do that today. It's not my Abhidharma, but it's the Abhidharma of our kind of little section of Buddhism. Yeah.
So this is going to get posted because there's stuff in the middle of this thing that I wish I had remembered. I'm serious. We're going to have to talk about this.
Okay. Anyway,
thank you.
What I'm, if you look carefully at what I'm saying right now, what I've said, I'm just trying to give you a little piece of candy that says, this candy is really sweet. You should eat this candy. And that candy is doing meditation. Everything is a justification, as it were, kind of a nasty word that is. But anyway, it's a reason to to help you.
I prefer shiny quarters
Shiny quarters. What's that?
instead of candy,
Oh,
You want a shiny quarter?
okay. Yeah, Rachel.
Thanks, Peter, for the talk. Come a little closer. Is that really setting an intention rather more like an attunement as opposed to a direction to take an action on? I mean, more of aspiration almost, but just an
Yes,
attunement.
it is. That's correct. Yes, that's correct. Yeah. I believe. I mean, I didn't. It was said by our. We were living in a Tendai area, but when we were living in Japan, we were on our land, Milinda, we rented, of course. Once was temple land, a long time ago. But see, one of my neighbors was this man, Horizawa Simon, who was a very nice guy, and that he just said that out of nowhere one time, but it really stuck with me, and it keeps coming back too. Oh, that's the nature of, that's what it's all about. Come a little closer. Come a little closer. I was going to say at the end of my talk, I wrote that last piece 10 minutes before my talk began. I was really fiddling with the last section that's because it's hard to explain, and I realized, that's what, if I want you to think about what I said today, which I don't, but if I did, I would say what you should take from it is come a little closer. The end. Come a little closer. But come a little closer to your non-self that's not a self. Daniel?
So Peter, to quote Mark, is it come a little closer, you're my kind of Buddha, so big and so strong. Come a little bit closer, I'm all alone and the night is so long.
I don't know that song. What is it? What's the melody?
Come a little bit closer, you're my kind of Buddha, so big and so strong. Come a little bit closer, I'm all alone and the night is so long. Dun, dun, dun. Dun, dun, dun.
I think it's Jane the Americans.
Right. Rock and roll will never die.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. Jane, you have any comments for us here on these things?
I've got so many, I'm not sure where to start. All this talking about now and real and things, it reminds me of the Christian argument about trying to determine how many angels can dance on the head of a needle. That's what it reminds me of, because you can go on forever and you can talk forever about now and reality, and you can never, as you say, get close to it really, because you're using words. And as far as the noumenal is concerned, I think you can touch noumenal. You can touch the ultimate person, who you are, if you stop thinking. But your mind has to be completely silent or quiet to touch on anything that has nothing to do with words. And the minute we fall back on words, we're stuck again in how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, because there's no limit to the division of yes and no in such an argument. So I think probably the only thing for me that this sitting brings out is that it's really important to stop the mind from thought so that you can see reality from the point of view of silence, rather than trying to see what's silent from the point of view of noise and words, and which is what we're trying to do when we discuss the noumenal or the phenomenal, but I meant just noumenal, in this case, the ultimate, from the point of view of words. There's just no touching on this with words. So if we want to talk about it at all, the only thing we can do is maybe gasho, because there's no other way you can even come close to touching on something that words are untouchable, as words cannot even approach what that means. So for me, now would be more just a question of being. And being is whatever it is, a gasho, eating steak, whatever it is, drinking your tea, morning coffee or your tea. That's the noumenal if you're not thinking, if you're just drinking it and holding the cup in your hand and feeling what it means to be present. And for me, that's now is just another word like past and future. And you can't really approach any of that for real with any kind of words. So if you want to really feel now, then really enjoy your cup of tea or your cup of coffee, or just sitting, or, you know, just laughing, whatever it is that your form of being is. So I know that I'm using a lot of words here, so it's, but yeah.
Anybody else? Yes, some hands are still up. Are they up for a reason or just not? Yes, Beth.
I had something I thought worth sharing, and so I am a specialist. So I teach dance for anybody who doesn't know me, and one of my focuses is a dance notation and a conceptual framework. And one of the hardest concepts to delineate for students is that the concept between motion and destination, that if I'm moving with an aim versus moving to move. So it takes a lot of practicing to put that in your body, that there is a way to move and continue moving without an aim. And it's very slippery in the same sense that you can never not have any aim, otherwise you wouldn't move. So you have to move, right? So it gets a little slippery in that way, but the idea of when we move with a sense of destination, we are planning for the future and we are planning for an outcome, and that is a very relative experience. We only have an outcome in relationship to what is happening now and has happened in the past. And motion erases some of those lines, and it's an interesting thing to try to put in your body, that you can move without expectation of stopping, and versus moving where there's an expectation of, once I've grasped, I cannot grasp more. I have just grasped fully. But is there a way that I can move toward grasping continually without ever grasping? So it's a philosophical question, but when we talk about the movement of our life, I think that there's value to the embodied, like Jane said, the gasho, as the action of the moment. It is the movement of the moment, and it comes and it goes, and it experiences mind, body, speech, a unifying moment. So I thought that might be interesting. Next time you're going somewhere, are you destination oriented or motion oriented, or neither?
Yeah, very nice. Yeah. So you're using kind of Buddhism in your justification of how people of what makes real dance.
Sorry,
Without saying that. Well, what you're saying about movement and destination
yes.
is could have come from your Buddhist experience.
And it's all dance.
Yeah.
But we have very clear definitions handed down to us through systems that this is the destination of dance, while dance is much broader. Dance is also stillness. So you cannot escape it. in some essence. Once the dance is happening, the dance is happening.
Very nice. Anyone else today? Yes, Sandy?
I was reading an article in some psychology magazine the other day, and they were talking about the article was about the past and the future and now. And the premise of it was that the mind itself is built to function, to constantly be planning for the future, good, bad, all kinds of scenarios. And it spends moments before the future, before the whatever becomes now. It's always in this flux of planning. And it's what interrupts our everyday. In other words, those thoughts from the mind about the future pop in and out constantly as we decide or we become aware of them. And then as we become aware of them, they become real. And they are a cause of our anguish, our depression, a lot of negativity in our lives, along with a bit of positive. But it's just how the mind is made up, and it's almost like you can't escape it. It's just how we're built to function, which I was, it sounded okay, but it wasn't the greatest, thinking that, am I never going to be able to shut this thing down? Do I have to put earplugs in to stop, to constantly hear all this garbage coming that I don't want to be involved in? Whatever comes, but do I really need to plan like that for it? So it's, it's part of every day. And it's nice to be able to think, well, I can go back into the past and just think about it. I can be in the now and just experience it. Or I could sit there in the future and frustrate myself like crazy, just wondering what's going to happen. And it's much nicer to think that, we have the ability to break through that, to find silence and to be in the now. So it was an interesting article.
No, thanks, Sandy. Yes, Rachel?
Well, it just came to me. I don't want to say anything about it, but I remembered, I think it's a Yeats poem about telling the dancer from the dance. And that just came to my mind hearing about dance and that poem. Thank you.
Michael?
Again, is the concept of the past and the future. They're useful means. They're means for us to function in our relative world, but we don't need them all the time. And when we become obsessed by them and attached to them, then all of a sudden we have left the now. But you realize, okay, if I'm going to walk down this road, remember there's a pothole up here that you can trip over, or you remember what happened the last time you walked down this path. It does have a purpose, the relativity of past and future, but they're not, for a lack of a better adjective, they're not real, but they are a useful tool that we can have. And we don't want to completely abandon them, but we need to put them in their proper place in our journey through into Buddhism and stuff. Am I close on that?
Sure. Yeah, that sounds fine. Yeah. Anyone else today? Okay. Well, sounds, anything else? Anything else? Going.